The smoke-filled atmosphere of Titan Station's underground casino clung to everything like a second skin, carrying the mingled sense of exotic alien beverages and the metallic tang of desperation. Marcus Chen adjusted his worn leather jacket as he surveyed the hexagonal gaming table, his weathered hands steady despite the enormous pot that had accumulated over the past 3 hours. Across from him sat Zephyr Voss, a tall, elegant being from the Endorian sector whose pale lavender skin seemed to shimmer under the casino's dim lighting. His elongated fingers, adorned with rings that spoke of better financial times, drummed nervously against the table's surface. The Endorian's large, opalescent eyes held a mixture of desperation and false bravado that Marcus had seen too many times in his years of freight running between the outer colonies. "Your move, human," Zephyr said, his voice carrying the melodious accent of his people. Despite his attempts at confidence, Marcus could hear the tremor beneath the words. The alien merchant had been hemorrhaging credits all evening, each losing hand driving him deeper into the hole he'd apparently been digging for months. Marcus glanced at his cards once more, though he'd memorized them perfectly. The game was called Stellar Convergence, a complex variant that combined elements of poker with mathematical progressions that appealed to the analytical minds of various alien species. He'd learned it during a 6-month layover on Kepler Station, and his human intuition gave him an edge that most aliens couldn't anticipate. "I'll match your bet," Marcus said quietly, pushing forward a stack of credit chips worth more than his cargo hauler made in a good month, "and raise you 5,000. The other players around the table, insectoid Thraxi trader and to reptilian saurians, had folded hours ago, recognizing the intensity building between the human and the Endorian. Now they watched with the fascination of spectators at a gladiatorial match, knowing that fortunes were about to be won and lost. Zephyr's opalescent eyes widened, and his pale skin took on a slightly green tinge that Marcus had learned indicated extreme stress in Andorians. The merchant's gaze darted to a young female Andorian standing quietly behind his chair, her presence having puzzled Marcus throughout the evening. "Father," the young woman whispered, her voice barely audible over the casino's ambient noise. Her skin held the same lavender hue as Zephyr's, but with an ethereal quality that seemed to make her glow softly in the dim light. Long, silver-white hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her large eyes held a mixture of concern and resignation that tugged at something in Marcus's chest. I don't have enough credits to match that raise," Zephyr admitted, his aristocratic bearing crumbling as the reality of his situation became clear. His hands shook slightly as he counted and recounted his remaining chips, each tally coming up woefully short. Marcus studied the alien merchant, noting the fine cut of his clothes despite their worn edges, the way he carried himself despite his current circumstances. This wasn't a career gambler or a desperate criminal. This was someone who had made increasingly poor decisions and found himself in an impossible situation. "Then perhaps you should fold," Marcus suggested gently, though he knew from experience that desperate gamblers rarely chose the sensible path. Zephyr's eyes flicked again to his daughter, and Marcus saw something pass between them, a silent communication that spoke of deeper troubles than a simple gambling debt. The young Endorian woman placed a slender hand on her father's shoulder, her touch seeming to convey both comfort and permission. "I have something else to wager," Zephyr said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Something of great value." Marcus felt a cold premonition settle in his stomach. "Zephyr, I don't think, Naya," the Endorian merchant interrupted, gesturing to his daughter. "I wager her service contract. 1 full year, as per Galactic Commerce Code 847. The casino fell silent. Even the ambient noise of slot machines and distant conversations seemed to fade as every patron within earshot turned to stare at their table. Marcus felt his mouth go dry as he looked at the young woman Naya, whose expression had shifted to one of calm acceptance that somehow made the situation even more disturbing. I can't accept that," Marcus said, pushing back from the table slightly. "She's your daughter, not property. Service contracts are perfectly legal in this sector." Zephyr pressed on, desperation making his voice rise. "She's highly educated, speaks 7 languages, trained in diplomatic protocol. skilled in navigation and ship operations. It's a standard arrangement. Naya stepped forward, her movements graceful despite the tension in the air. It's true, Mr. Chen, she said, her accent softer than her father's but no less musical. And I consent to this arrangement. My father's debts are considerable. This may be our only option. Marcus looked into her large, expressive eyes and saw something that made his decision for him not resignation or fear, but a quiet strength and a spark of hope. That perhaps this human might be different from whatever alternatives she was facing. The wager is accepted, announced a deep voice from behind Marcus. He turned to see one of the casino's enforcement officers, a massive Carillion whose rock-like skin and glowing red eyes marked him as someone not to be trifled with. Galactic commerce regulations require all parties to honor legitimate wagers. The human must accept if he wins. Marcus felt the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. He looked at his cards again, then at Zephyr's desperate face, then at Naya's steady gaze. The smart play would be to fold, to walk away from this mess, and let someone else deal with the consequences. But something in the young woman's expression told him that walking away might condemn her to a fate worse than serving aboard his cargo ship. All right, Marcus said finally, I accept the terms. Zephyr laid down his cards with trembling hands, revealing a strong combination that would have won most games. Stellar alignment, he announced, though his voice held no triumph. Marcus hesitated for a moment, then placed his own cards on the table. Cosmic convergence. The silence that followed was deafening. A cosmic convergence was the rarest hand possible in stellar convergence, appearing perhaps once in 10,000 games. Marcus had known he held it from the first card, but the magnitude of what it meant in this context was only now sinking in. Zephyr stared at the cards as if they might change if he looked hard enough. His face went through a spectrum of expressions: disbelief, horror, and finally a kind of broken acceptance. Impossible, he whispered. The odds are astronomical. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor, Marcus replied. Though he felt no amusement at the situation, the enforcement officer stepped forward, a legal tablet materializing in his massive hands. Contract transfer is now in effect. The female, Naya Voss, is bound to serve Marcus Chen for a period of 1 standard year, as per the terms agreed upon by all parties. As the officer's scanner confirmed the biometric data of all involved, Marcus found himself the reluctant owner of a service contract he'd never wanted with a young woman, whose life had just been gambled away by her own father. The weight of responsibility settled on him like a physical burden, but when he looked at Naya's face, he saw something unexpected: gratitude mixed with cautious optimism. Whatever came next, Marcus realized both their lives had just changed forever. The docking bay of Titan Station hummed with the usual cacophony of departing vessels and loading cargo, but Marcus felt as though he moved through it all in a bubble of surreal silence. Beside him, Naya walked with measured steps, carrying a single travel bag that seemed pitifully small for someone whose entire life had just been upended. The wanderer isn't much to look at, Marcus said as they approached his cargo hauler, feeling the need to fill the awkward silence that had stretched between them. Since leaving the casino, the ship squatted on its landing struts like a mechanical toad, its hull scarred by micrometeorites and painted with the kind of patches that spoke of a pilot who did his own repairs. Naya paused at the foot of the boarding ramp, her opalescent eyes taking in every detail of what would be her home for the next year. She has character, she said diplomatically, though Marcus caught the slight upturn at the corner of her mouth that suggested hidden amusement. That's one way to put it, Marcus replied, keying in the access code. The ramp descended with a grinding whine that made him wince. I keep meaning to fix that sound, but somehow there's always something more urgent breaking down. As they entered the ship's cramped interior, Marcus saw it through her eyes: the cluttered galley with its jury-rigged coffee maker, the navigation station buried under star charts and maintenance manuals, the living area that generously could be called efficient. Everything was clean but worn, functional but far from luxurious. I'm afraid the accommodations are pretty basic, Marcus continued, leading her through the narrow corridor. There's only one proper cabin, so you'll take that. I usually sleep In the pilot's chair anyway, when we're traveling. Naya stopped walking, turning to face him with an expression of surprise. That's very kind of you, but unnecessary. In Andorian culture, service contracts typically involve shared quarters. It would be unusual for me to displace you from your own bed. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks and was grateful for the dim corridor lighting. Well, human customs work differently. The cabin is yours. For a moment, something flickered across Naya's features, an emotion too quick for Marcus to identify. Then she nodded formally. As you wish, Mr. Chen. Just Marcus, he said quickly. We're going to be stuck together for a while. Might as well be comfortable with each other. The cabin was small but private, with a narrow bunk, a compact storage unit, and a porthole that currently showed the industrial sprawl of Titan Station. Naya set her bag on the bunk and looked around with the same careful assessment she'd given his ship. It's perfect, she said, and Marcus was surprised to realize she meant it. I've had far worse accommodations on diplomatic missions with my father. Marcus leaned against the doorframe, studying her profile as she unpacked her few belongings. Can I ask you something? Back there in the casino you seemed almost relieved when your father made that wager. Why? Naya's hands stilled on a delicate silver ornament she was placing on the small shelf. When she turned to face him, her expression was more open than it had been since they'd met. My father's gambling debts weren't just to the casino, she said. Quietly, there are other parties involved. Dangerous ones. If you hadn't won tonight, I would likely have ended up serving them instead. She shuddered slightly. Your reputation as a fair and honorable pilot is known even in the outer colonies, Marcus. When I saw you at that table, I found myself hoping. She trailed off, but Marcus understood. You were hoping your father would lose to me specifically. Yes, the admission seemed to cost her something. I know it sounds calculating, but when faced with unpleasant alternatives, one learns to recognize the best available option. Marcus felt something twist in his chest, anger at the situation that had forced such calculations on someone so young, and a strange protective instinct he didn't fully understand. Well, for what it's worth, I've never been much good at the whole master and servant thing. I was thinking we could just be crewmates, partners, maybe. Naya's eyes widened, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked genuinely startled. Partners, you said you were trained in navigation and ship operations. I could use the help, and you could use the experience. Seems like it might work out for both of us. The smile that spread across Naya's face was like sunrise after a long night, transforming her entire expression. I would like that very much. Marcus, over the next several hours, as they prepared the Wanderer for departure, Marcus discovered that Naya hadn't exaggerated her skills. She moved through the ship's systems with an intuitive understanding that impressed him, her long fingers dancing over control panels as she optimized their flight plan for maximum fuel efficiency. You've done this before, he observed, watching her work at the navigation station. I've been traveling with my father since I was 12, she replied, not looking up from her calculations. Andorian children are expected to contribute to family enterprises from an early age. I learned ship operations the same way human children might learn to drive ground vehicles. What about your mother? Marcus asked, then immediately regretted the personal question when he saw Naya's hands pause over the controls. She died when I was young, Naya said simply, a plague that swept through the outer colonies. My father, he was never the same after that. The gambling started as a way to distract himself from the grief, but it became something else over time. Marcus nodded, understanding more than he let on. He'd seen grief drive people to make increasingly desperate choices, watched good people destroy themselves trying to outrun pain that couldn't be gambled or drunk away. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Thank you. Naya's voice was soft, but when she looked at him, her expression was steady. He's not a bad man, Marcus, just broken. In some ways, as the Wanderer lifted off from Titan Station and set course for the Outer Rim, Marcus found himself settling into an easy rhythm with his unexpected crewmate. Naya proved to be an excellent cook, transforming his basic food supplies into meals that actually had flavor. She was also surprisingly good company, with a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard and stories of her travels. that revealed both intelligence and compassion. On their second night in hyperspace, they sat in the galley sharing a meal of her creation, something she called ketha stew that tasted like the best comfort food he'd ever had. "Can I ask you something now?" Naya said, setting down her spoon. "Fair's fair," Marcus replied. "Why do you live like this, alone, traveling from one job to the next with no permanent home? Don't humans usually prefer stable communities?" Marcus considered the question, realizing no one had asked him directly in years. "I used to have that, a home, a family, plans for the future. But things happen, people leave or—" He paused, surprised by how difficult it was to voice. "My wife died in a transport accident 5 years ago. After that, staying in one place felt wrong somehow, like I was waiting for something that was never going to come back." Naya reached across the small table and placed her hand over his. Her skin was cooler than human normal, but somehow the touch conveyed more warmth than he'd felt in years. "I understand," she said simply. "Sometimes movement is the only way to survive grief." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the ship's gentle hum the only sound around them. Finally, Marcus looked up to find Naya watching him with an expression he couldn't quite interpret. "What?" he asked. "I was just thinking," she said, a slight smile playing at her lips, "that perhaps the universe has a better sense of humor than either of us realized." "How so?" "To lost souls, thrown together by chance and circumstance, discovering they might not be as alone as they thought." Her opalescent eyes held his steadily. "It's either cosmic irony or cosmic kindness." Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of knots he'd carried for so long he'd forgotten they were there. "I'm hoping for kindness," he said quietly. "So am one," Naya replied, her smile growing warmer. "So am I." As they cleaned up their dinner and prepared for another night in hyperspace, Marcus found himself looking forward to tomorrow's conversations, to learning more about this remarkable woman who had entered his life under such strange circumstances. The year ahead suddenly seemed less like an obligation and more like an opportunity, though for what exactly, he wasn't yet ready to name. 3 weeks into their journey, Marcus had grown accustomed to waking up to the smell of Naya's breakfast preparations and the sound of her melodious voice humming Andorian traveling songs. This morning, however, he jolted awake to the harsh blare of proximity alarms and Naya's urgent voice over the ship's intercom. "Marcus, we have company. 3 vessels on an intercept course, and their transponder signatures aren't friendly." Marcus rolled out of the pilot's chair where he dozed off during his watch and quickly took in the tactical display. 3 sleek pursuit ships were closing fast, their dark hulls and predatory lines marking them as vessels designed for one purpose: hunting. "Korath's enforcers," he muttered, recognizing the ship configuration. Korath Vex was one of the most notorious crime bosses in the Outer Rim, known for his particular brand of creative cruelty toward those who crossed him. Naya appeared in the cockpit doorway, her usually serene expression tight with worry. She'd changed from her sleeping clothes into a practical jumpsuit that somehow still managed to accentuate her graceful movements. "They're hailing us," she reported. "Let me guess they want to discuss your father's debt, among other things." "Yes." Naya moved to the co-pilot's seat with fluid efficiency. "Korath isn't known for accepting partial payments or renegotiating terms." The communication panel crackled to life without their permission, a sign that the pursuing ships had considerably more advanced equipment than the Wanderer. A gravelly voice filled the cockpit, speaking galactic standard with the harsh accent of the Krillian homeworld. "Human vessel, this is Enforcer Prime Vex 7. You are harboring stolen property belonging to Korath Vex. Surrender the Andorian female immediately, and your death will be swift." Marcus glanced at Naya, whose pale lavender skin had taken on the greenish tinge she'd learned indicated fear or stress in her species. Despite her obvious anxiety, her hands were already working the navigation console, calculating jump coordinates with practiced efficiency. "Counteroffer." Marcus replied into the comm. "You turn around and pretend you never saw us, and I won't. Report your illegal pursuit into neutral space to the Galactic Commerce Authority." The response was immediate and predictable. Energy blasts sizzled past the Wanderer's hull as the pursuit ships opened fire. So much for diplomacy, Marcus muttered, throwing the ship into evasive maneuvers. The old cargo hauler groaned under the stress, but she responded gamely to his demands. Jump coordinates locked in for the Epsilon drift, Naya reported, her voice steady despite the ship shaking around them. It's an asteroid field dense enough to provide cover, but navigable if we're careful. And if we're not careful, Marcus asked, spinning the ship through a tight barrel roll that brought them dangerously close to one of their pursuers. Then we become part of the asteroid field permanently. A blast clipped their port shield generator, sending cascading failures through the ship's defensive systems. Warning lights bathed the cockpit in angry red, and the smell of burned circuits filled the air. Shields down to 30%, Naya announced. We can't take much more of this. Marcus made his decision. Jump. The stars stretched into lines as the Wanderer leaped into hyperspace, the pursuing ships following mere seconds behind. The jump lasted only minutes before they dropped back into normal space, amid a chaotic dance of tumbling rock and ice. They're still with us, Naya observed, studying the sensor readings. But the asteroids are interfering with their targeting systems. Marcus piloted them deeper into the field, using every trick he'd learned in 20 years of flying to thread the needle between massive chunks of stone and metal. Behind them, their pursuers struggled with the treacherous navigation. They're larger, more powerful ships less suited to the delicate maneuvering required. There, Naya pointed to a sensor reading, a hollowed-out asteroid with what looks like an abandoned mining installation. We could hide there while they search, Marcus nodded, guiding the Wanderer toward the asteroid. As they approached, he could see the skeletal remains of mining equipment and the dark mouths of excavated tunnels. Looks like this place has been dead for years. They slipped through a cavity large enough to accommodate their ship, landing in what had once been a main excavation chamber. Marcus powered down all non-essential systems, leaving them in near darkness with only emergency lighting and life support. Now we wait, Marcus said quietly, unstrapping from the pilot's seat, and hope they don't think to look inside every asteroid in the field. Naya moved to stand beside him at the viewport, where they could see the external cavity that concealed them in the dim light. Her skin seemed to glow with its own inner luminescence, and Marcus found himself studying the elegant line of her profile. I'm sorry, she said suddenly. This is my fault. If my father hadn't, stop. Marcus interrupted gently. Your father's mistakes aren't your responsibility. And I made the choice to accept that wager. Remember, nobody forced me. Naya turned to face him, her large eyes reflecting the emergency lighting. Why did you accept the wager? I mean, you could have folded and walked away. Marcus considered the question, one he'd been asking himself since that night in the casino. I saw something in your eyes, he said finally, a kind of quiet strength, I guess, and hope. Maybe. It seemed like walking away would have been wrong. Something shifted in Naya's expression, a softening that made Marcus's pulse quicken slightly. You saved me, she said quietly, from a fate I couldn't bring myself to imagine. We saved each other, Marcus replied, surprised by the truth of it. These past weeks, I haven't felt this alive in years. They stood close together in the dim space, the danger outside forgotten for the moment. Marcus became acutely aware of Naya's scent, something like jasmine mixed with ozone, and the way her breathing had quickened slightly. Marcus, she whispered, and he heard a question in his name. Before he could respond, the ship's passive sensors chimed softly. One of the pursuit ships was passing close to their hiding place, its searchlights sweeping across the asteroid's surface. They froze, barely breathing as the light played across their concealment. For a heart-stopping moment, Marcus thought the beam lingered on their cavity, but then it moved on, continuing its methodical search of the asteroid field. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, the searcher moved away. They waited in tense silence until Naya's monitoring of communication frequencies confirmed that the pursuit ships were widening their search pattern, moving to other sectors of the asteroid field. I think we're safe for now, Naya breathed, sagging slightly with relief. Marcus turned to find her closer than he'd expected, close enough to see the flecks of silver in her opalescent eyes. The tension of their narrow escape seemed to have created a charged atmosphere between them, an awareness that hadn't been there before. Naya, he began, not sure what he wanted to say. She stepped closer, her hand coming up to rest on his chest. "I know this complicates things," she said softly. "The contract, our arrangement. But I need you to know that what I feel for you has nothing to do with obligation." Marcus covered her hand with his own, feeling the rapid flutter of her pulse beneath her cool skin. "What do you feel? Safe?" she said immediately. "For the first time in years, I feel truly safe. But more than that," she paused, seeming to gather courage. "I feel alive, connected to someone who sees me as more than a problem to be solved or an asset to be traded." Marcus cupped her face gently, marveling at the silk-soft texture of her skin. "You're not property, Naya. You're not a contract or an obligation. You're extraordinary." When their lips met, it was with a tenderness that surprised them both. Her mouth was warm despite her cooler skin temperature, and she tasted like the exotic tea she favored. The kiss deepened naturally, years of loneliness and weeks of growing connection crystallizing into this moment of perfect understanding. They broke apart slowly, foreheads touching as they shared the same breath. "This changes things," Marcus said quietly. "Yes," Naya agreed, a smile in her voice. "For the better, I hope." Before Marcus could respond, the ship's long-range communication system crackled to life. A familiar voice filled the cockpit one. That made Naya stiffen in his arms. "My daughter," came Zephyr's melodious but strained voice. "If you can hear this, I am more sorry than words can express. I have found a way to make things right, but I need to speak with you. Please respond. If you receive this message." Marcus felt Naya's conflicted emotions and the tension of her body against his. When she looked up at him, her eyes held a mixture of hope and fear. "We should answer," she said quietly. "Whatever he's done, whatever mistakes he's made, he's still my father." Marcus nodded, understanding but also worried about what new complications Zephyr's reappearance might bring to their already dangerous situation. As Naya moved to the communication console, he couldn't shake the feeling that their peaceful interlude was about to come to an abrupt end. The universe, it seemed, still had more surprises in store for them. Zephyr's coordinates led them to Heaven's Rest, a small colony world on the far edge of charted space where the local government asked few questions and the scenery more than compensated for the lack of galactic amenities. Rolling hills covered in silver-leaf trees stretched toward distant mountains, and twin suns cast everything in a warm, golden light that made Naya's lavender skin seem to glow. Marcus landed the Wanderer in a clearing outside the colony's main settlement, his nerves on edge despite the peaceful surroundings. 3 days had passed since they'd received Zephyr's message. 3 days of cautious travel through backroute jump points, while Korath's enforcers continued their search. "He's here," Naya said, studying the scanner readings. "His ship's signature is about 2 kilometers north, near what looks like a small dwelling." Marcus checked his sidearm out of habit, then caught Naya's worried expression. "Just being careful," he said gently. "After everything that's happened, I'm not taking any chances with your safety." The walk through Heaven's Rest revealed a community that had embraced simplicity over technology. Humans, Andorians, and several other species worked together in gardens and workshops, their faces bearing the kind of contentment that came from choosing a slower pace of life. Children of various species played together in the streets, their laughter carrying on the warm breeze. "It's beautiful," Naya breathed, her hand slipping naturally into Marcus's as they walked. "I can see why Father would come here." They found Zephyr sitting on the porch of a modest cottage, his elegant frame looking somehow smaller than Marcus remembered. The Andorian's opalescent eyes were fixed on the distant mountains, but he turned as they approached, rising with the careful movements of someone carrying invisible weights. "Daughter," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "My dear Naya, Father." Naya released Marcus's hand and embraced Zephyr. Though Marcus noticed a certain reserve in her posture, "You look different." It was true. The desperate edge that had driven Zephyr to wager his daughter had been replaced by something that looked almost like peace, though Marcus could see the guilt that shadowed his every expression. "I have done terrible things," Zephyr said quietly, his gaze including Marcus in his confession. "Things that shame me to my very core, but I have found a way to make amends." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked, his protective instincts still on. High alert, Zephyr gestured for them to sit on the porch's simple wooden chairs. As they settled, he pulled out a legal tablet that displayed official-looking documents. "I have sold everything," Zephyr announced. "My ship, my remaining trade goods, even my family's ancestral jewelry. It was enough to pay off my debts to Korath and purchase the dissolution of Naya's service contract." Marcus felt Naya stiffen beside him, her sharp intake of breath barely audible. On the tablet's screen, he could see the documentation debt, clearances, legal transfers, and most importantly, a contract dissolution form that bore official seals. "You're free, daughter," Zephyr continued, his voice breaking slightly. "Free to choose your own path, make your own decisions, as you always should have been." The silence that followed was heavy with years of complex emotions. Marcus watched Naya's face cycle through surprise, relief, and something that might have been grief for the father she'd lost to gambling. Long before tonight's revelation, "Thank you," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "But father, what will you do now? You've given up everything." Zephyr's smile was sad but genuine. "I am going to learn to live simply. The people here have offered to teach me farming, honest work that doesn't depend on the whims of chance. Perhaps it's time I discovered who I am when I'm not running from my mistakes." As father and daughter talked, sharing words that began to bridge years of accumulated hurt, Marcus found himself grappling with an unexpected emotion: loss. The contract that had brought Naya into his life was dissolved. She was free to go anywhere, choose any path. The assumption that she would stay with him suddenly seemed presumptuous. As if sensing his thoughts, Naya reached for his hand, her fingers intertwining with his in a gesture that had become natural over their weeks together. "The contract may be dissolved," she said, looking directly into his eyes, "but that doesn't change what I choose. If you'll have me, I want to stay. Not as property or obligation, but as your partner, in every sense of the word." Marcus felt something tight in his chest loosen and expand. "Are you sure? You could go anywhere now." "Do anything I could," Naya agreed, her smile growing warmer. "But I've found something with you that I never expected to find: home. Not a place, but a person who sees me for who I am and values what I offer." Zephyr watched this exchange with growing understanding, his expression shifting from surprise to approval. "You care for each other," he observed. "Truly care." "We do," Marcus said, squeezing Naya's hand. "More than I thought possible." "Then I am glad," Zephyr said softly. "In my selfishness and desperation, I may have inadvertently given my daughter the greatest gift a chance at real happiness." They spent the evening on Zephyr's porch, sharing stories and beginning the delicate process of rebuilding a relationship damaged by years of poor choices. As the twin suns set, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Marcus found himself studying Naya's profile in the golden light. What are you thinking?" she asked, catching his gaze. "That may be the universe does have a sense of humor," he replied, "but a kind one." Later that night, as they walked back toward the Wanderer under a canopy of unfamiliar stars, Naya stopped suddenly and turned to face him. "Marcus," she began, her voice carrying a formality that made him pay attention, "there's something I need to say, something I should have told you before." Marcus felt a flicker of concern. "What is it?" In Andorian culture, when two beings choose to bond, truly bond, not just physically but emotionally and spiritually, there's a ceremony, a commitment that goes deeper than any legal contract. Her opalescent eyes held his steadily. "I want that with you, not because of circumstances or convenience, but because I love you." The words hit Marcus like a physical force, not because they were unexpected, but because they gave voice to feelings he'd been carrying for days without fully acknowledging them. "I love you too," he said, marveling at how easily the truth came. "More than I thought I could love anyone again." Naya stepped closer, her hands coming up to frame his face. "Then bond with me. Let me be your partner in truth, not just a name." Marcus kissed her then, pouring all his hopes for their future into the connection between them. When they broke apart, both were breathing heavily, the space between them charged with promise. "How do we do this?" Marcus asked. "The bonding ceremony, I mean." Naya's smile was radiant in the starlight. Elder Thane in the colony is qualified to perform the ritual. It's simple. Really just the two of us, speaking truths to each other and to the universe. When? Marcus asked, already knowing his answer. Tomorrow. Naya said without hesitation. If you're willing. I've waited long enough to truly belong somewhere. With someone. Marcus pulled her close, feeling the rightness of it settle into his bones. Tomorrow. He agreed. And every day after that, as they continued toward their ship, hands clasped and hearts aligned, Marcus reflected on the strange journey that had brought them to this moment. What had begun as an unwanted obligation had transformed into the greatest gift he'd ever received, not just Naya's love, but the chance to build something new and meaningful from the wreckage of their separate pasts. The future stretched ahead of them, full of unknowns, but no longer empty. Whatever challenges awaited, they would face them together, bound not by contracts or circumstances, but by choice and love freely given. The universe, Marcus decided, definitely had a sense of humor, but more importantly, it had impeccable timing. 6 months later, Marcus woke to the sound of Naya's laughter drifting through the open windows of their cottage. On Heaven's Rest, the sound had become his favorite way to start each day, a musical reminder of how much their lives had changed. Since that fateful night in the casino, he found her in their garden, kneeling among the silver-leafed plants that seemed to thrive under her care. She wore a simple dress that complemented her lavender skin, and her long hair was braided with small flowers, a human custom she'd adopted and made her own. The Ketha blossoms are finally opening, she said, looking up at him with the radiant smile that still made his heart skip. Elder Thane says it's a good omen for the ceremony. Today was their bonding day, not the rushed, practical ceremony they'd initially planned, but a proper celebration with friends and family. Zephyr had surprised them both by how completely he'd embraced his new life as a farmer, his hands now permanently stained with honest soil instead of gambling tokens. He'd also surprised them by asking to help plan the ceremony, determined to give his daughter the wedding he'd never been able to provide. Everything ready? Marcus asked, settling beside her among the plants. Almost. Naya leaned against him, fitting perfectly into the curve of his arm. Juno's ship arrived this morning, with the supplies from Kepler Station, and Elder Thane has prepared the ceremonial space. Your friend seems interesting. Marcus chuckled. Juno Reeves was his oldest friend and former business partner, a woman whose mouth was as quick as her piloting reflexes. She'd been skeptical about his decision to settle down until she'd met Naya, after which her skepticism had transformed into wholehearted approval. She likes you, Marcus said. Trust me, if she didn't, you'd know it. And I like her, Naya replied, though I think she enjoys making me blush with her stories about your past adventures. They spent the morning in comfortable domestic activity, a routine that still amazed Marcus with its simple pleasures. The wanderers sat in a nearby clearing, upgraded and maintained, but no longer their home. That was this cottage they'd built together, with its blend of human practicality and Andorian aesthetics. As the afternoon approached, their small community began gathering in the ceremonial grove that Elder Thane had prepared. Humans and Andorians mingled easily, along with several other species who'd made Heaven's Rest their home. Children ran between the adults, their excitement infectious as they helped distribute the traditional flower wreaths. Marcus stood at the heart of the grove, wearing his best shirt and the ceremonial sash that Naya had embroidered with symbols representing their journey together. Juno served as his witness, her usually irreverent demeanor replaced by rare solemnity. You clean up nice, Chen, she murmured, though I still can't believe you're getting married on a farm planet. It's where we're happy. Marcus replied simply, yeah, I can see that. Juno's expression softened. She's good for you, Marcus. Better than good. The gathering fell quiet as Naya appeared at the grove's edge, escorted by her father. She wore a gown that seemed to have been woven from moonbeams and starlight, its flowing lines emphasizing her graceful movement. But it was her expression that took Marcus's breath away, pure joy unmarred by doubt or reservation. Elder Thane, a dignified human woman with silver hair and kind eyes, stood before them as Naya joined Marcus in the ceremonial circle. The ritual was a blend of traditions, honoring both their cultures while creating something uniquely their own. "We gather today," Elder Thane began, "to witness the bonding of two souls who have chosen to walk the same path, Marcus Chen and Naya Voss. You come before this community not bound by contracts or obligations, but by love freely given and received." Marcus took Naya's hands, marveling as always at the perfect fit of their fingers. In the golden afternoon light, her skin seemed to glow with inner radiance, and her opalescent eyes held depths he was still discovering. "Naya," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the grove, "when I first saw you, I thought I was winning a card game. I had no idea I was actually finding my future. You've brought light back into my life, shown me that home isn't a place, but a person who understands your heart. I promise to love you, protect you, and build a life with you that honors both our pasts and our dreams for the future." Naya's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she responded, "Marcus, you saved me from a fate I couldn't imagine, but more than that, you gave me something I'd never dared hope for, a partner who sees me as I truly am. You've shown me that strength can be gentle, that love can be both passionate and peaceful. I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, to support your dreams as you've supported mine, and to love you with every beat of my heart." Elder Thane smiled as they exchanged the simple bands they'd crafted together. "From heaven's rest silver, by the power vested in me by this community, and witnessed by the bonds of love that connect all beings, I declare you bonded in spirit and truth. What you have joined together, let none separate." The grove erupted in celebration as Marcus and Naya kissed, sealing their commitment with the same tenderness that had marked their first kiss months ago. Around them, friends and family cheered, flower petals fell like colorful snow, and music began as someone produced a traditional Andorian harp dot as the celebration continued into the evening. Marcus found quiet moments to appreciate how perfectly everything had come together. Zephyr, looking healthier than he had in years, regaled Juno with stories of his farming experiments. Children of various species played elaborate games among the silver trees. Neighbors who had become family shared food and laughter under the emerging stars. "No regrets?" Naya asked, finding him during a brief lull in the festivities. Marcus pulled her close, breathing in the jasmine scent that would forever mean home to him. "Only one," he said, earning a look of concern. "I regret that it took so long to find you." Naya's laughter was like music, drawing the attention of their friends and family. "Then we'll have to make up for lost time," she said, her eyes sparkling with mischief and promise. Later, as the celebration wound down and their guests began drifting back to their homes, Marcus and Naya stood together in their garden, hands clasped as they looked up at the star-filled sky. What are you thinking?" Naya asked, a question that had become ritual between them. "That sometimes the best things come from the worst circumstances." Marcus replied, "Your father's gambling problem, that ridiculous wager, even Korath's pursuit. Without all of that, we might never have found each other." "The thread of fate," Naya said softly. "Andorians believe that certain connections are written in the stars, long before the individuals involved understand their destiny." "And what do you think our destiny holds?" Marcus asked. Naya was quiet. For a moment, her opalescent eyes reflecting the distant stars. "Adventures," she said finally, "not the desperate kind we've had, but the good kind. Building something meaningful together. Maybe raising children who understand both human determination and Andorian wisdom." Marcus felt his heart swell at the image her words painted. "Children, someday," Naya said, her smile mysterious, "when we're ready to share this happiness we've found." As if summoned by their words, a shooting star streaked across the sky, its brilliant tail drawing their eyes upward. They made wishes separately, but somehow in harmony before returning to their cottage and the future. They were building one day at a time. The wanderer still sat in her clearing, ready for whatever journeys might call to them, but she was no longer a refuge from life. She was simply a tool, a means of exploring the galaxy together when wanderlust struck them both. For now, though, home was enough. Home was everything. As they settled into bed, Naya's head on Marcus's shoulder and her cool skin warming against his, Marcus reflected on the strange journey that had brought them to this moment of perfect contentment. A year ago, He'd been a lonely cargo pilot running from his grief. Tonight, he was a husband, a partner, a man who'd found his place in the universe. 2 years later, the familiar hum of the Wanderer's engines filled the cargo bay. As Marcus finished securing the last of their trade goods, the ship had undergone another round of upgrades. Since their bonding ceremony, now sporting better shields, improved life support, and a nursery that had been Juno's wedding gift for when you'd get around to filling it, she'd said with her characteristic bluntness. Navigation systems optimized for the Kepler station run, Naya called from the cockpit, her voice carrying the easy confidence of someone who'd fully claimed her place as co-pilot. We should arrive 3 hours ahead of schedule if the hyperspace lanes stay clear. Marcus smiled as he made his way forward. Their cargo business had flourished beyond his wildest expectations, built on Naya's connections in the Andorian trade networks and his reputation for reliable delivery. More importantly, they'd found a way to help others quietly arranging for refugees to find new homes, carrying medical supplies to frontier colonies, and occasionally serving as unofficial mediators in interspecies disputes. He found Naya at the navigation station, her long hair now streaked with silver ribbons in the Andorian tradition of bonded couples. The sight of her still made his pulse quicken, even after 2 years of waking up beside her every morning. "How's our passenger settling in?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "See for yourself," Naya said, tilting her head toward the small observation lounge they'd added to the ship. Through the doorway, Marcus could see a young human woman sitting by the viewport, her dark hair pulled back and her clothes showing the wear of someone who'd traveled far with little resources. She clutched a small bag in her lap, everything she owned in the galaxy. "Reminds me of someone I used to know," Marcus murmured, pressing a kiss to Naya's temple. "She's running from an arranged contract marriage on Titan Station," Naya said quietly. "Heard about us through the underground network, how we help people find new starts." Marcus nodded. Their reputation for helping those caught in impossible situations had spread through word of mouth, bringing them passengers like Elena Santos, who needed transport to a colony world where she could build a life on her own terms. "Speaking of new starts," Naya said, turning in his arms with a smile that made his heart skip, "I have news." Something in her tone made Marcus focus completely on her face. "What kind of news?" "The kind that means we'll definitely need that nursery Juno installed." Naya's smile grew radiant as Marcus's eyes widened in understanding. "Dr. Yates confirmed it this morning, before we left Heaven's Rest. Apparently, the compatibility between our species continues to surprise medical science." Marcus felt the world tilt on its axis in the best possible way. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "We're having a baby." "We are," Naya confirmed, laughing as Marcus lifted her off her feet and spun her round the small cockpit space. "Though I should warn you, according to Dr. Yates, human Andorian pregnancies tend to be quite eventful." "Eventful how?" Marcus asked, setting her down but keeping his arms around her. "Accelerated development, unique nutritional needs, and apparently the babies are born with an instinctive understanding of both parent species' languages." Naya's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Our child will be truly bilingual from birth." Marcus cupped her face gently, still amazed by the silk-soft texture of her lavender skin. "Are you happy about this?" "Incredibly happy," Naya replied without hesitation. "Are you?" Marcus answered by kissing her, pouring all of his joy and excitement into the connection between them. When they broke apart, both were breathless and grinning. "I should check on Elena," Naya said eventually, though she made no move to leave his arms. "She's fine," Marcus said, glancing at the passenger lounge where their traveler was now reading from a data pad. "Besides, we have more important things to discuss, names for instance." "Already thinking ahead, I see." Naya's sequential blink had become even more endearing over their years together. "Though we should probably wait to find out if we're having a son or daughter before we get to attach two specific options." "True," Marcus agreed, then paused as something occurred to him. "Your father is going to be beside himself with excitement. A grandfather and successful farmer in the same year." Naya laughed, the musical sound filling the cockpit. "He's already started planning the child's education." I suspect our little one will know as much about agriculture as about space navigation. A chime from the communication console interrupted their conversation. Marcus glanced at the display and felt a familiar mix of anticipation and concern. It's Commander Torres from the Galactic Commerce Authority. Probably another favor they want us to handle. Take it, Naya said, settling into the co-pilot's seat. We might as well hear what they're offering. Torres appeared on the screen, his weathered face bearing the expression of someone who'd spent decades dealing with the galaxy's various crises. Marcus, Naya, good to see you both. Commander, Marcus replied. What can we do for you? There's a situation developing in the Proxima sector. A group of Cherulian refugees needs transport away from a conflict zone, but the regular evacuation ships can't get through the blockade. Torres paused meaningfully. We need someone with your particular skills and connections. Marcus exchanged a glance with Naya, seeing his own thoughts reflected in her expression. Dangerous, yes, but also the kind of mission that could save lives and make a real difference. Compensation? Marcus asked, already knowing they'd take the job regardless. Standard rates plus hazard pay, and the authority would consider it a personal favor. Torres smiled slightly. I understand congratulations are in order, by the way. Word travels fast in the commerce networks. Thank you, Naya said, her hand instinctively moving to her still flat abdomen. Though I have to ask, how dangerous is this mission? Exactly. Dangerous enough that I wouldn't ask if I had anyone else with your success rate, Torres admitted. But the refugees include children, families who've lost everything. They need someone they can trust. Marcus felt Naya's hand slip into his, her touch conveying both support and shared purpose. They'd built their life together on the principle of helping others find their own second chances. A baby on the way didn't change that commitment. If anything, it strengthened it. Send us the coordinates, Marcus said. We'll divert course after we drop off our passenger. I was hoping you'd say that, Torres replied, relief evident in his voice. Detailed briefing package is coming through now. And Marcus, Naya, be careful out there. After Torres signed off, they spent several minutes reviewing the mission details. It was complex and risky, requiring them to navigate both a military blockade and political tensions between two hostile factions. Second thoughts? Marcus asked, noting Naya's thoughtful expression. Never, she replied firmly. Though I think it's time we started being more strategic about these missions. We have more than ourselves to consider now. Marcus nodded, understanding her meaning completely. Their child would grow up knowing that their parents worked to make the galaxy a better place, but they also needed to ensure they'd be around to raise that child. We'll be more careful, he promised, but we won't stop being who we are. I wouldn't want us to, Naya said, squeezing his hand. I fell in love with a man who couldn't walk away from people in need. I just want to make sure our child gets to know that man too. As they adjusted course for the Proxima sector, Marcus reflected on how much their lives had changed since that night in the casino. They'd gone from strangers bound by an unwanted contract to partners in every sense of the word, building something meaningful from circumstances that should have been temporary. In the passenger lounge, Elena Santos looked up from her reading as they passed, offering a tentative smile. She was starting her own journey toward freedom and self-determination, just as Naya had 2 years ago. Full circle, Marcus murmured, watching their passenger return to her data pad. Not quite, Naya corrected with a smile. Circles suggest repetition. What we're doing is more like a spiral, similar patterns, but always moving forward, always growing. Marcus considered this as he settled into the pilot's seat for the jump to hyperspace. She was right. As usual, they weren't repeating the same story. They were creating new chapters in an ongoing narrative of love, growth, and service to others. The stars stretched into lines as the wanderer leaped toward their next adventure, carrying within her hull a refugee seeking freedom, a couple planning their future, and the promise of a new life that would bridge two worlds. It wasn't the life Marcus had planned 2 years ago, but it was better than anything he could have imagined. And the best part, the story was far from over.